So the Economic Policy Institute just recently put out a letter from economists that argue in favor of raising the minimum wage. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, by how much? Well, they argue that we should raise the minimum wage to $10.10 by the year 2016 and to slowly kind of phase it in so that it doesn't really affect the markets too much. All right. So what about the economists? How many were they, and what kind of qualifications do they have? Well, there's actually 75 economists, and that includes 7 Nobel laureates. So these guys know economics. They actually know what they're doing. They're not some dude off the street like, I don't know, I think I'm an economist. I can count. No, it's not that kind of guy. And they say, and they argue, that the government should pass a minimum wage law and tie it to inflation. That's a great idea. Now, they write in this letter to the Economic Policy Institute, at a time when persistent high unemployment is putting enormous downward pressure on wages, such a minimum wage increase would provide a much-needed boost to the earnings of low-wage workers. Now, I know what some people watching are going to say. But Jeff, if you raise the minimum wage, that's going to hurt poor people. You're going to shut down jobs. Well, the letter actually addresses that by saying, no, it won't hurt poor people. It's actually going to help poor people. Let me explain. From the letter, quote, research suggests that a minimum wage increase could have a small stimulative effect on the economy as low-wage workers spend their additional earnings, raising demands and job growth and providing some help on the jobs front. In fact, actually, estimates say that raising the minimum wage to $10.10 would help grow the economy by $22 billion, and the demand that it creates will actually help create 85,000 new jobs. So the argument that this will kill jobs is actually ridiculous propaganda. When people actually have money, they're going to spend more. And that money goes back into the economy. Rent, food, gas, clothing. These are not luxury goods. These are goods that people don't just go out and buy in a whim. Okay, people need these things. You have to buy this stuff. And since you have to buy it, money goes right back into the economy. And that helps those businesses that actually sell those items. And here's what happens when you have more demand. You actually have to hire people to actually make and sell those things. Anybody who cannot see that is either blind or an idiot. Economics 101. Now, here's what doesn't happen when demand rises. People losing their jobs. Layoffs. Layoffs actually happen when there is low demand, when you're not getting a lot of customers. Companies don't need workers during times of low demand. But when you actually have customers with money to spend, well, holy fucking shit, they're going to come and spend it. And it's going to increase demand, and it's going to lead to hiring more workers to meet that demand. And here's an interesting fact. That it's actually cheaper to hire more people at $10.10 an hour than to actually pay existing staff overtime. It's actually cheaper for companies to do that than to pay time and a half. It makes sense. And studies show that when you raise the wage, there's actually less employee turnover. Why? Well, because they're actually more loyal and happy. And they'll work harder. Studies have proven that. And not only that, but there's a benefit to that. You see, when you have less employee turnover, that actually reduces your training costs as an employer. You don't have to train somebody every week because everybody is quitting in disgust or finding a better job. Saves you money. And More studies show that states that raise the minimum wage during times of high unemployment actually do better. Amazing, right? Couple of examples. Alabama and Tennessee, 2009, they raised their wage. They actually saw 12-month job increases well above the national average. 10% increase in Tennessee's minimum wage saw an increase of employment around 4.5%, higher than the national average. Alabama actually saw a growth of about 4% of jobs. When you raise the wage, there's a good chance that you'll create jobs. It's not always the case. Not always. But generally, that's the trend. There are, of course, always other factors to consider. When you look at the states that actually raised their wages, they saw an average of about 0.5% of employment growth when you average everything out. Not all of them grew, but 21 out of 35 states that raised their minimum wage actually saw more job growth during the time of high unemployment. And look, a lot of states already have higher minimum wages than the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. It's not as if Americans are lazy. We actually are more productive than we've been. Look at that. Look at that. Good job, America. You are more productive than you have ever been before. It's just too bad you actually haven't seen the result of your hard work. Now, why is that? That's because the money that you earned, that you worked for, your productivity, went into the pockets of someone else, to an executive, to someone to buy an extra fucking yacht. And look, this actually shows what would happen, how much you would actually be making if the minimum wages were indexed to how hard you've actually worked. Now, finally, here's another argument. Another argument that people against the minimum wage love to throw around. And that's that it will hurt small businesses. Think of the small businesses. You're going to kill these small businesses. Well, here's some facts. 2/3 of all low-wage workers actually don't work for a small business. Okay? So the people that you work primarily help don't work for small businesses. They work for large corporations. These large corporations that can afford to actually pay higher wages. New York Times article said, quote, "The evidence shows that most low-wage employees work for large corporations, which have largely recovered from the recession and have reinstituted generous pay packages for executives. Instead of a super generous pay package, how about make a less generous pay package and pay your employees for their labor, for their work, for their productivity?" You've seen the chart. Productivity, super high. But Americans are not getting paid for their productivity. Now, an example of this, Walmart. Walmart's highest paid executive raked in about $18.1 million in the last fiscal year. And instead of creating jobs, it actually used most of that money in dividends and stock buybacks. Didn't create jobs, didn't help their low-wage workers actually be able to afford to get off government assistance, because when you work for Walmart, you work for poverty wages. And you have to get on public assistance to even survive. No, instead of making sure that they weren't milking the taxpayer, they bought their own stock to inflate their stock prices. But okay, back to small business. Now, there was a survey that was done of many small businesses. This survey showed that no, small businesses aren't actually worried about raising the minimum wage. Their primary worry is poor sales. They're not making enough money from sales. Why? Because most people don't have enough money to spend. And that's really the big problem. Now, this poll was actually done by the National Federation of Independent Businesses. And these small business owners, like I said, they cite low sales revenue as their main economic concern, not the minimum wage. Wage costs are a minor consideration, even through the Great Recession. And the study actually concludes that the real concern among small businesses is not that their low-wage workers earn too much, but that their customers don't earn enough to shop there. And look, small businesses actually have to charge more. It's not like they can go to China and get Chinese crap and import it and sell it at really low prices like Walmart can. No, they actually have to charge more for their goods because they're a local store. Now, if people actually made more money from their jobs, they could shop at these small businesses and actually support their communities instead of the Walton family. And these people wouldn't have to rely on Walmart. See, that's the genius of the Walmart strategy. You drive down wages so low, and then, well, golly gee, I'm going to have really cheap shit at my store so that you are forced to come back with your poverty wages and spend them all here. It's a genius business model. But it's exploitive as hell. And that's the main issue with it. The other issue is, of course, the issue of corporate welfare and welfare itself. Walmart's one of the biggest welfare queens in the United States, almost as much as the banks. Like I said before, a lot of people who work at Walmart have to get on government assistance. If you boost the minimum wage, make it higher so that people can actually afford to live on their own working there, because no one working full-time should be in poverty. No one. If you actually boost the minimum wage to a living wage, then that will reduce dependency on government systems. You see a lot of people bitching about welfare. Well, I know how to end it. You raise the minimum wage. It's not hard. It's not rocket science. It's just simple economics. So don't be fooled by the propaganda from those that actually benefit from driving wages low and keeping them there, because they have an incentive to keep those low wages down. Why? Because they make money. They can buy an extra yacht. They can influence a politician. They can buy back their own stock and then artificially inflate their own stock prices. No. Don't listen to the propaganda. It's time to fight back. It's time to raise the minimum wage.